Hello, everyone. This is Eleanor Rigby. I was sitting by the window this morning holding this small, tarnished silver locket. It doesn't have a picture inside anymore, just a faint scent of cedar and a tiny, folded piece of paper with a phone number that hasn't been in service for 40 years. Looking at this little trinket, I realize how much weight a single mistake can carry through a lifetime. Time has a way of blurring the edges of our memories, turning sharp pains into dull aches. But some regrets stay as vivid as the day they were born. If I hadn't eventually learned the lesson I'm about to tell you, I would have lost everything that truly matters. I would have ended up a very lonely woman in a very large, silent house. Before I tell you this story, please subscribe. I want to pass this wisdom down before I'm gone so you don't make the same mistakes I did. It's important that these lessons don't get buried with my generation. Back in the late 1960s, life felt like it was moving at 1,000 miles an hour. My husband, Arthur, and I had just bought our first little house in a suburb that smelled like fresh cut grass and charcoal. Grills, we were young, we were ambitious, and we were surrounded by a circle of friends that felt more like family. We had the Millers next door and the Sampsons across the street. We spent every Friday night playing cards, drinking cheap wine, and dreaming about the futures we were going to build. We thought those bonds were unbreakable. We thought we were all moving in the same direction at the same speed. But then the 70s hit and the world started to change. People started looking inward. The me decade, they called it later. And I'll be honest with you, I fell right into the trap. I became obsessed with bettering my life, but I was doing it at the expense of the people who loved me. I started comparing my life to everyone else's. I wanted the new car, the bigger television, the more prestigious social circle, and I started seeing my old friends not as people to cherish, but as mirrors of my own perceived failures or successes. That the mistake I made, the one that cost me people I had known since grade school, was the mistake of pride and the poison of unsolicited judgment. I remember one night in 1974 particularly well. It was a July evening, and we were all gathered on the Miller's back porch. The crickets were so loud you almost had to shout to be heard. My friend Sarah was talking about the struggles she was having with her marriage. She was being vulnerable. She was hurting, and she was reaching out for a hand to hold instead of listening. I gave her a lecture. I can still hear my own voice, and it makes me cringe to think of it. I told her she wasn't trying hard enough. I told her that Arthur and I never had those kinds of problems because we valued commitment more than she did. I was smug. I was self-righteous. I stood on a pedestal of my own making and looked down on her. Pain, I thought I was being honest and helpful, but I was really just being cruel to make myself feel superior. Young people today might not understand this, but back then your social circle was your entire world. There was no internet to find new communities. When you pushed people away, they stayed away, and that night I pushed hard. I saw the look in Sarah's eyes, the way the light just went out when she looked at me. She didn't argue, she just went quiet. Within 6 months, the Millers stopped calling, then the Sampsons stopped coming over. I had created an environment where everyone felt judged instead of loved. Arthur saw it happening. He tried to warn me. He'd say, "Eleanor, people don't want to judge, they want a friend." But I wouldn't listen. I was so convinced that I was right and everyone else was falling short. I thought my standards were a virtue. I didn't realize they were a cage. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest year of my life when I realized that the phone had stopped ringing altogether. I would sit in that kitchen, the linoleum cold under my feet, waiting for a knock on the door that never came. I had won every argument, but I was sitting in an empty room. I remember one night he sat me down at the kitchen table. He looked at me with so much sadness in his eyes. He said, "Eleanor, if you keep choosing to be right over being kind, you're going to be right all by yourself." That hit me like a physical blow. I realized that in my quest to have the perfect life and the perfect marriage, I was destroying the very thing that makes life worth living: connection. I had lost three of my closest friends because I couldn't keep my ego in check. I couldn't just sit in the mud with them. I had to stand on the dry ground and tell them they were dirty. Experience has taught me that your friends are the witnesses to your life. When you lose them because of your own arrogance, you lose a piece of your own history. I spent the next few years trying to mend those bridges, but some were burned too badly. Sarah moved away and we never spoke again. To this day, it's a hole in my heart that never quite filled in. I promise you, there is no told you so that is worth the loss of a 30-year friendship. You have to understand something that took me decades to fully grasp. Love, whether it's in a marriage or a friendship, isn't a feeling you have. It's a decision you make every morning. It's the decision to be kind when you'd rather be right. It's the decision to listen when you'd rather speak. In all my 80 years, I've learned that the most valuable thing you can offer someone isn't your advice. It's your presence and your lack of judgment. When Arthur and I got married in 1962, we thought love was all about the spark, but the spark doesn't keep the house warm in the winter. It's the slow burning logs of patience and loyalty that do that. Modern dating and modern friendships seem so fragile now because everyone is looking for a reason to leave. Everyone is looking for a red flag or a reason to cancel someone. In my day, we knew people were flawed, and we knew we were flawed. We didn't throw people away because they were going through a hard time or because they made a mistake, but I had thrown people away by making them feel small. I had to learn the hard way that my marriage survived not because we were perfect, but because we eventually learned how to forgive. We learned how to say, I am sorry, I was wrong. Those are the most powerful words in the English language, yet they are the hardest to say. I see young people today struggling with loneliness, and I want to reach out and tell them, stop looking for perfection. Stop judging your friends' lives against some imaginary standard. Life is messy. It's loud, it's confusing, and it's full of failure. If you want to have friends when you're 80, you have to be a friend through the ugly years. You have to be the person who stays when things get complicated. My late husband used to say that a good life is built on a foundation of unspoken understandings. It's the understanding that we're all just doing our best. It's the understanding that a friend's failure isn't an opportunity for you to feel better about yourself. It's a call to service. It took me losing people I loved to realize that my honesty was often just a cloak for my own insecurity. I wanted to point out their cracks so no one would notice mine. Think about that. Think about the people in your life right now. Are you holding them to a standard that you yourself couldn't meet? Are you being a sanctuary for them, or are you a courtroom? I wish I could go back to that night in 1974. I wish I could reach across that porch table, take Sarah's hand, and just say, I'm here. I don't have the answers, but I'm here. And that's all she needed. But I gave her a sermon instead of a hug, and I've paid for it in silence for 50 years. In the end, what matters isn't the car you drove or the house you kept. It's the hands you held. It's the people who show up to your 80th birthday party and remember the time you laughed until you cried in 1972. Loyalty isn't just about staying, it's about how you treat people while you're there. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to be weak. I want you to be happy. I want you to have a house full of laughter and a phone that never stops ringing with people who truly care about you. But that requires a sacrifice. It requires the sacrifice of your pride. It requires you to lay down your need to be the wise one or the successful one and just be the loving one. The long-term implications of loyalty are a life filled with warmth, The implications of pride are a life filled with expensive things and nobody to share them with. I've spent a lot of years reflecting on that silver locket and the number inside. It's a reminder to stay humble. It's a reminder that we are all walking each other home. And it's much easier to walk when you're holding someone's hand rather than pointing a finger at them. Thanks for listening to An Old Soul. Subscribe, share this with someone you love, and cherish them while they are here. Don't wait until they are gone to realize that you were wrong. Tell them today. Be the friend you want to have. I'll be here next time to share a bit more of this long journey with you. Be kind to one another. Would you like me to write a similar script focusing on a different life lesson, such as financial struggles or the early years of marriage?